All right. I'm with James Lindsay, everyone. Welcome back to Walk-Ins Welcome.
Hey,
It's been a while.
it's been a while.
It has been. When was the last time you were on the podcast? Do you remember?
Oh my God. Probably like this time of year, 2019, maybe.
Oh, holy shit.
Yeah.
You and I saw each other last in person in Aspen, right?
Yeah.
That was like, what, 2019?
That was also 2019. Yeah.
When was that? July? It was the summer,
Yeah, it was
right?
summer. It
Yeah.
was summer.
That was fun.
That was a pretty good trip.
That was a good trip. That was it. But now it's like seems like the days of the golden days of yore.
The idyllic past when the world hadn't gone mad yet. COVID hadn't happened.
It had gone mad though.
It had.
But what we didn't fully, well, maybe you did, but what we didn't fully comprehend was how much more mad it was going to go. Because you guys were in the middle. You were there with Peter Boghossian, Helen Pluckrose, and we were all at Pamela Presky's, and she's freaking great. And it was, what were you doing there? You were trying to like give a talk?
Yeah, she put together like a panel for us with I forgot what the organization was, but they're in Aspen, and she had us go, and we were talking, I think, about our grievance studies.
Yes.
Hoax papers that we had written.
Yes.
Because that came out in the end of 18. So the
Yeah.
timing lines up right. And so we were talking about kind of the crisis in academia. And if I remember right, I don't know if we did for sure there, but can't imagine we didn't. We were trying to make the point that like what's happening in academia is not going to stay in academia,
Yeah.
right? It's going to leak out, or it's going to take over society, which is kind of what motivated us to do the project in the first place.
Yeah. Remember when I asked for on Twitter examples of self-censorship? It was right before I met you in person. And I was like, James, this stuff is everywhere. And people were like, oh, it's just going to be a bunch of right-wingers who are being silenced. I'm like, no, this is left-wingers telling me that like they can't critique someone who's building a bridge, and it's in all of healthcare, and this is like,
Yeah.
this was, you couldn't even talk about this.
Yeah, that's right.
And you were like, send me some of this stuff, and not all of it has been vetted, but I mean, it's pretty clear that this was the case, and these were people who were at all of these different institutions saying, and it's basically DEI, like all this crap that they're trying to get out.
Yep.
And they're saying like this was happening, and no one believed them, and they didn't feel like they could say anything.
Yeah, I remember going to like Los Angeles. It had to be before COVID because that kind of changed everything. I mean, being in Hollywood, I guess. So we'd go out, go to one of the little bars or whatever with a group of people, and we'd be just talking, and then be like, shh, don't talk like that.
Yeah.
Everybody was like, keep your head down. Don't say stuff like that in public.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it when we get back to the apartment or whatever. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, you don't understand. We're in Hollywood. You can't talk like that. And I was like, okay, yeah. So lots of self-censorship.
I still have friends when we'll be out to dinner that are here who have all kind of, I guess they're called leftugees, like who have all left California. They'll be like, I still get nervous about talking, and not just from LA, from San Francisco as well. Like they're like, I still get nervous talking about this stuff in public. I'm like, that's fucking crazy, dude, that you still have that fear to like talk about something, and it's anything really, but it's wild. I was at a dinner when I was in LA right before the fires. I went there for, my family's still there, and we went for just like the week of New Year's, and I went out to dinner with some friends, Megan Dahm actually being one of them. And I had my back to there was a couple seated like at a deuce kind of right behind us, and another person that I won't blow up her spot. And the three of us were talking, but she's in the culture wars. And the three of us were talking and going on. And I turned around, like I just got that spidey sense, and I turned around and they both had their phones in that weird way. And I was like, are they fucking recording us right now? And I wasn't sure if they were or weren't, or if I was just being paranoid. But even Megan was like, I don't know, they might have been. And it was just so weird. I'm like, that, because they gave me that look of like, you caught me when I looked at them.
Yeah.
Because I like looked over my shoulder, and they were like, and then they were texting each other instead of talking, which is fucking weird too.
Yeah, that's sus.
And I was like, I fucking hate this. Like I haven't had to deal with this at all in Texas. I mean, maybe it would happen in Austin, but, it was weird. And I was like, the other thing that I hate about that whole environment of self-censorship and fear is that it does make you paranoid.
It does.
You're like, are they not returning my call because they saw something I tweeted, or is it just because they're busy? Because generally, most people are so self-involved that it's just because they're busy. It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
But in this kind of climate, it might.
Yeah, I've like, everybody I think has heard of, well, maybe not everybody, but I think a lot of people have heard of imposter syndrome, right? Which is like you get your degree and you go get your like little cutesy job or whatever, and you believe that you're actually an idiot.
Yeah.
But you got hired to do, whatever it is, math or something hard. And then you live your life at work thinking every day you're about to be discovered as the imposter, the idiot that you are. And it's like there's this other imposter syndrome where it's like you wonder if you're going to be discovered that you're the bad person, the evil person, the one who, has wrong opinions or wrong thoughts.
Right.
And it's like this weird, like you said, there's this paranoia, like, are they not calling me back? It's like, I sent them a text. It's been like 2 days. Like, that's kind of weird. Like, are they mad at me? What did I do? And there's this weird vibe that comes with that.
Yeah, and it's unsettling because that paranoia is so bad. It's something I just had to like put completely aside. It's like, all right, whatever the reason, it just can't matter. You have to just like keep moving forward and staying in touch with people who are your sane touchstones. And I think now you've been that was such a like innocent time. I remember going and seeing your talk and being like, you guys need someone like me to like be a translator, to take what you're saying and try and.
That's right.
Because I was sitting in the audience, I'm like, no one understands what the fuck you guys are talking about. Like, no one knows about cultural Marxism or like. Yeah. And I also think you guys were new. You in particular at the speaking, like you have improved a lot over in the past, like, I guess, what has it been now? How many years? 6 years. Fuck. Yeah, it's been a crazy decade.
You've had a little bit of practice now.
Yes, you've had a lot of practice. Even to just contextualize how insane the past, like the last time I saw you, I was single. And now I am married with a child.
Yeah, that's right.
Like a lot can happen in a short period of time.
Can happen. That's right. Yeah, it's like, well, it's almost like I actually literally did talk to a couple comedians, and that kind of helped me learn how to talk.
Yeah.
By the way, they're just,
in
one guy was
terms.
like, this guy was like, you're never going to give a really good talk until you bomb at least once. So just like let it be, like don't worry about it if you go give like a total bomb. And so that's like really relaxing. But then it's like I learned by especially watching comedians this idea of just having a conversation with the room. Right? Yeah. And so you learn to read the room. You get to kind of tell when their eyes glaze over or when you said too many syllables in one, breath or whatever, that word had a hyphen and they've checked out. Yeah. And so it's like, but it just feels like I'm talking to you, but I'm talking to, 400 people or whatever.
Yeah.
And that changed everything.
And what is it like to be somewhat, I mean, you seem to like, how do you stay sane? Have you stayed sane? Have you gotten insane? There's word on the street that you've lost your mind.
There is word on the street that I've lost my mind, but I don't think I have. I mean,
would you know?
That's the problem, right? Let's use one of those big words. There's an epistemological problem here, right? If you've lost your mind, you're almost guaranteed
not to know it.
To think you haven't. Right. Not just not to know it, but to think you didn't. And so I think being still completely aware of that is a good, sanity check.
Right. No one who's lost their mind would question if they've lost their mind.
Yeah, I question it like daily because I'm like, am I getting gaslit or am I nuts? Like, what's going on?
I have a joke about how I voted for Trump this time. And I was like, if you had told 2015 Bridget that 2025 Bridget would have voted for Trump, I would have been like, wow, so I lose my mind in the future. Like, that's really unfortunate for me.
And now you're like, happened? So much winning, I'm getting tired of winning.
Yeah, it is, you have to, I think this is the thing too that happened with this election more than any of them, is that preference falsification that everyone had where they were afraid they were speaking in hushed tones about these things, that it freed them to be like, oh, no, everybody else is on board with this.
Yeah, I kind of got the impression that was coming in April.
Yeah.
So my wife and I and my company, we all went together on like a cruise, right? and to the
Sounds horrible.
Caribbean. Well, it depends on the boat.
I'm just
It depends on the boat.
Yeah.
And it was a big boat, which means
Which
you've
means
got a
that
little
you
kid.
were
So
locked down
there were a
for-
ton of little kids and a ton of loud music and a ton of really bad, cheap food that, left a little bit to be desired. But at any rate, we were at the whole game when you're on a cruise without great food, by the way, is to just go around to the different free food places and try to find one that doesn't suck.
Okay.
So you eat somewhere different, like 3 times a day, 4 times a day, to try to find something
In the cruise?
on the boat. Just
I'm
you're looking for
so
something.
preternaturally, like my hatred of cruises is so deeply ingrained from being a waitress in Newport, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And they would all come in
Oh,
and
I
they'd be
bet.
like, it would be like 6 old ladies and they'd be like, we'll split 1 cup of chowder, please.
Oh, my
just so they
God.
don't have to, because you got all that free food.
Yeah, right.
And they just want to be able to say they tried the chowder in Newport.
Yeah.
It's like, I just became such an
Anti-cruiser.
Yeah.
So we were on this boat and we're at the taco place because like the only place that you didn't have to pay for extra that was like worth eating. And we're sitting there and there's these 2 women who are what I refer to now as visible Democrats. There were these 2 visible Democrat women.
Like purple hair.
Yeah, like
Okay.
the whole thing, like, the way they were dressed, like the
I
style
want to
of clothing.
know what the like visible Democrat,
They just got that
criteria
like kind
is.
of the dress was a little bohemian, the piercings, not all tattoos indicate visible Democrat, but some do. The hair, the colors in the hair in particular.
That's a big sign.
And they're talking with each other, and like your story in LA, right? They're the next table over. Well, we didn't bust out our cameras and film them. But they just keep saying, she's destroying the place. She sucks. She's awful. And we kind of finally picked up that they were talking about a governor. And there's only really 2 choices. It's either Whitmer or Hochul.
Yeah.
So we went over and we were like, Whitmer or Hochul? And they were like, Hochul. We're from Manhattan. Visible Democrats. And then we talked to them for a few minutes and they were like, well, we're totally Democrats. We're total leftists. And we're on a boat, so we can say it. Don't tell anybody. We're voting for Trump.
Yeah.
We're done with it. They said Biden's ruining the country, Hochul's ruining the state, and Adams is ruining the city.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, there is something. Like the preference falsification is now reaching deep into Democrat strongholds.
Yeah.
Like something's going to happen here.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I also think one of the reasons that I was a little bit like, I wasn't really on the fence. People are like, was it hard? I'm like, no, it wasn't actually hard at all. I think part of the reason that I felt compelled to vote was that idea of like too big to rig. Even though my vote in Texas wouldn't matter, I was like, I just want to be part of the popular vote. I want to be counted. I want to be part of this, like the people who are like, fuck this.
Yeah,
like,
as a Tennessean, I can agree. I'm like, well, Tennessee's going to go like 70%.
Yeah.
So like, let's go.
It's weird to be you're such a canary in the coal mine. I can see how you would go insane, but I've seen you kind of battling online a lot. I mean, always.
Always.
Yeah.
I ran into Dave Rubin, speaking of people, the other day. I was in D.C. around the inauguration lurking. I was kind of hiding, actually. But I ran into Dave Rubin, and he just comes up to me, and, Dave's Dave. He's great. And he comes up to me, and he's like, kind of greets me and smiling, and he just whispers, can we make it through lunch without you fighting with somebody else on Twitter today? And I'm like, Dave, shut up. I'm going to go fight with you. You know, but I'm fighting on Twitter. Yeah, it's happening.
Yeah.
Or X, it's X. Thank you, Elon.
What do you get out of that?
I think I have a disability.
You're like, there's someone is wrong on the internet. Is it that?
It is that disability. But there's only particular kinds of like bullshit that I won't leave alone. And I got pretty good at ignoring people that are like rude to me, except I think it's funny to like make a joke about them, right?
Yeah.
Or to not to make an example of them, but to make them into an example of something I'm talking about. Like your haters will prove your point very frequently for you, right? And so I do a lot of that, and it looks like fighting, but I'm not actually fighting. But like gross misrepresentation of something that I've said is something that for whatever reason, if I see it, I can't leave it alone, right?
Yeah.
And I've
That's funny.
solved this problem basically mostly by turning off notifications. So it used to be that these guys that have the bigger accounts, the smaller accounts don't, but the bigger accounts would come into my push notifications. And I'd be like, oh, you
Yeah.
bad word. And then it's like, I have to go say something. And it's like, don't do it. And I have this little fight with myself, and then I go and smart off, and then the rest of my day sucks because of it.
Yeah.
And I'm finally figuring out that this is actually not a productive use of my time and activity. So I'm trying to discipline myself against these people.
I
also notice that there are people definitely trying to exploit that now.
I somewhat take responsibility for your ex habits.
You can have all of the blame.
I mean, they were really trying to rein you in when you were with the group when we were in Aspen, and I was like, they were like, you can't make jokes, you need to be taken seriously. I was like, whatever, you can be funny on there. And then I always say, like, take the work seriously.
That's it. I was gonna say it back to you. Take the work seriously. Don't take yourself seriously.
Yes,
I quote you on that all the time.
It is something that has been very helpful to me, but then when I see you going off, I'm like, this is my fault.
Yeah, well, some of it is because I don't. Well, another thing I learned is I don't take myself seriously on social media. And another thing that I learned is that if you can post something yourself knowing it's being made fun of or kind of a joke or whatever, like let's say there's some picture. I don't know. I don't have any pictures of me that look bad, but let's say there was a picture of me that looks bad. And
I love how confident you are about that.
I posted the picture of me that looked bad and made fun of myself. You become impervious to other people making fun of it, right?
Yeah.
Or if maybe, I don't know, you make a video with a giant sword and you post that and you make fun of yourself, you become impervious.
Yeah, I mean, I was raised that way though. I'm Irish Catholic in our family.
But you have like 40 brothers or something?
No, I have like 26 first cousins.
That's what it was.
Yeah, my whole family it was like, people always ask me if I want to do roast battle, and I'm like, my whole upbringing was roast battle. Like,
yeah, right.
I have no desire to relive any of that. But it was very much like, you have to learn how to laugh at yourself because otherwise the world's going to do it for you.
That's
it's
right.
very Irish too, to just be like, take the piss out of each other. That's how we, and in green rooms, like that's just, and on like job sites. And this is where I feel like the Democrats just completely lost touch with working class humor. Is like, do you know how people talk to each other when they're working in a restaurant? Do you know how people talk to each other on job sites or like
anywhere
firemen or in the military? Do you have any friends in the military who send you memes? Because they're fucked up. Like,
they're real.
The most fucked up.
All the way.
Like, do you know any Marines?
Yeah, for real. So yeah, it's your fault.
No, it is my fault.
But no, I mean, there's other people we can blame too.
But I will say I'm lucky to have a therapist husband, because that is one thing that drives me fucking insane. I'm like, I can deal with like all of the pushback, the shit talk, the calling me a grifter, all of the things that come with being open online. I'm not some victim, but when someone like misrepresents me, it makes me insane. And Jaron is like, Bridget, this is also part of it. He's like, this is also part of it. If you can't let that go, like, how can you let go all this? He's like, this is just someone calling you a grifter too. It's all part of being a public person, and you just have to let it go. And it's been helpful to have someone who's like, this is part of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Just let it go.
I'm going to have to remember that.
Yeah, go step away. And you saved me, though, when Black Twitter came for me.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They were like, I didn't know. I hadn't really experienced, like, internet pylons like that. And you texted me and you were like, log out for 3 days. And I was like, it was the best advice, because it just moved on.
Yeah, they do. They get bored. Until you get some of these dedicated haters. A dedicated hater never really goes away.
I'm going to make that t-shirt, dedicated hater.
Dedicated hater. I've got dedicated haters. I've got people. I thought about sending people W-2s this year. Like, most of your content is based on me.
Oh.
Yeah, they didn't make me money. I'm going to send them a W-2 because, like, they work for, like, I don't know. What maybe I got my tax forms wrong. I don't know. But their entire business is talking about me.
Wow.
And it's like, that's kind of cool, I guess. Like, flattering. I don't know. Could you get a hobby?
What do you think are the biggest criticisms what are the criticisms of you that you feel are unfair? What's the deal with you and the fucking woke right? To me, the woke right is just the old right. Can you like?
Well, it was the alt right, is what it was.
Well, it's okay.
It's resurrected alt right. That's like the simplest definition ever.
I don't know why I hate that term, the woke right. It makes me so.
There are reasons, I'm sure. I don't care. This is the thing, though. People think I'm like all dedicated to this term, because I use it a lot. But it's like I'm not. I'm more than happy to change if I can think of a better one. I just can't. And then the problem.
But isn't it just like the right being the right?
No, this is.
So explain to me how it's different.
Well, the kids would call them extra, right? They're not just the right. They're like extra right. But some of them have openly, we're going to use big words again, but they've openly subscribed to Marxist analysis. They've openly subscribed to critical theory, but for their ends, not for whatever the left wants to do with it. They've openly subscribed to postmodern. There are people that describe themselves as postmodern traditionalists. Like, imagine you're mad at woke right. Try that term, right?
That doesn't even make sense to me.
That's a collision of two concepts.
That's like an oxymoron.
They are pretending to be traditional. Right. They know their tradition is fake and doesn't matter, but they're going to love it anyway. And they're going to make a cartoon pastiche version of it. We're going to be extra trad. We're going to wear extra like old fashioned clothes and Old Spice or whatever. I don't know what to do. I don't hang out with these people. They're hipsters though, is what they are. They're right wing hipsters.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, it's time the right had some hipsterishness. The thing that I do think that's happening in balance is that they're trying to have like an intellectual side of the right.
Yes.
And they're trying to have the hipster side of the right. I do think these things. Yes,
but have you read Mosca?
I do think these things need to emerge in order to find some semblance of balance in the culture. It can't just be the left wing. I guess my bigger question is.
I mean, I'm still the guy that's like, maybe we need less nerd shit.
Are you dealing with an HMO like I am? It's such a pain in the butt. If I want to get any sort of testing done to ensure I'm making my health a priority, I have to wait weeks for an appointment to see my doctor, then get a referral from her, and wait weeks more for an appointment with the specialist I needed to see just to get some lab work. Quest simplifies this process. I can purchase my own lab tests online and test for a multitude of health issues I might be concerned about, then take those results to my doctor better armed with the information I need. At questhealth.com, you can get hundreds of tests across several different categories, from allergies to heart health, hormones, sexual health, women's health tests for egg quantity, perimenopause, menopause, men's health tests for testosterone, prostate, and so much more. These are lab quality tests, the same ones you'd be given at your doctor's office, so prioritize your health and visit questhealth.com today. Use the code WALK-INS to get 25% off and find answers to the multitude of health questions you may have. That's questhealth.com and use the code WALK-INS for 25% off.
Can you escape postmodernism though?
I mean,
like, aren't we in? Isn't it going to be an umbrella for everything?
That's a legitimate question. Are we in postmodernity, which therefore would necessitate a theory of postmodernity that might be postmodernism? It depends on that's a very complicated term, so it depends on what we mean by it. And I don't know. Maybe we are in postmodernity because of our democratization of publication. That's fancy talk for you can post on social media.
Right.
You can make a video. You know, anybody can set up this kind of studio literally in a room in their house, in a garage, wherever they want, and have a TV show.
Yeah.
Like there's complete.
And now I can go to the White House.
Yeah.
And get a press pass.
Well, I'm a little like, I wonder how that's going to work out for
I can't wait. Hi, Bridget Phetasy, dumpster fire.
Dumpster fire. when are you going to do the daylight savings time thing, please?
When are you going to abolish
winter.
Daylight saving? Winter.
Will you do an executive order? Is President Trump signing winter out of existence anytime soon? Can we make America Florida yet? But yeah, so the media environment that we're in is very democratized. Mm-hmm. It's very fake. Like, people don't know how fake social media is. And I don't mean fake like, oh, there's advertisers and there's all. No. It's profoundly fake. It is like the algorithms are all driven by like trending content. The trending content is generated by networks of people who are working together to and cross promote so that they get higher up in the monetization scheme on X, which by the way is gaming that system, which is why Elon sometimes takes away their checks. And then they say, you're censoring me for my opinion. No, they're not. You're gaming his freaking payout system, which costs him lots of money. But that creates the trends that the algorithm then traces. And so what you're actually being fed, what you're actually seeing on X, unless you're using like lists and other workarounds, is very much driven by fake real activity, as in real humans interacting together. Like, hey, I get in a text group with you, whatever things you want blown up, send them to me, and I'll send them to so-and-so. And, we'll get a group chat together of 30 of us, and we all, 500,000, 1 million followers each or whatever. We all retweet each other all the time, comment on everything, even if we don't agree, just whatever to keep the thing going. So much of it's driven by that.
Wow.
And then we haven't talked about bots, because the bot problem is nuts. And I don't know if it's fixable. You can buy bots. Anybody can buy bots. Foreign governments have legions of bots.
Yeah.
Like China has, the Chinese bots are kind of funny. They're not very good.
Yeah.
And if you figure you have one and you reply anything in simplified Chinese, they'll reply back to you in simplified Chinese and says something like, we're going to crush America. Something very crazy.
They're like, come to TikTok.
Yeah, right. The Russian bots are actually really good. Like they're very radical.
It's very funny
radical.
too. You can see it is true. Like you're like, oh, Ukraine woke up or whatever. Like when you're like suddenly something's trending. Yeah, you're like, oh, it's 9 a.m. in Moscow.
That's right. Well, yeah, and so they're much more sophisticated. They are actively trying to use bot networks to radicalize the right. And a lot of people are thinking this is a huge social movement. There's tons of like frog accounts on Twitter that are saying the same thing. And it's some room full of Russian guys with 75 phones each in front of them, putting out thousands of accounts. And it's only about 100. You could have like roughly 10,000 accounts verified on X for about $100,000 a year. If you do the math, it's a little more than that, but order of magnitude. That's not a big investment for a government.
Yeah.
The Chinese government spends $16 billion a year on influence campaigns against the West. $16 billion.
This is why I don't buy this idea that, the whole China thing is interesting, because I don't know how, like, I was kind of on board with Trump wanting to ban TikTok.
Yeah.
And then he went back on it, and now you hear a lot of the people going, well, we need to have like multi-powers, and it's in the benefit of America and the world for America and China to be friends. And I'm like, I don't think China sees it that way.
That's not how China sees it.
You might think that, and that's great.
Oh,
and
yeah,
the
we can be
people might
buddies.
think that, but I don't think the CCP sees it that way.
Yeah, they see it like, hey, let's be friends, fingers crossed. Like, come on, guys. They are a communist country. They're not your friend. They are not even your trading partner, like in business. I know that that's the thing is it's the biggest consumer market in the world.
Yeah.
And it's the biggest manufacturing base in the world. And that should be making Americans feel like, oh no. But instead they're like, money.
Yeah, and that was one of my questions was, is that why all those guys were up with Trump at the inauguration? Like, are they hoping to enter into the market in China, which really for them is it just like, you keep hearing this word reciprocity, like from Elon, and it's bullshit that like they have their stuff here and we don't have our stuff there. So my question is, are they going to sell out all of the Americans and all of our information
possibly
to China in order to get in there?
Look at Boeing.
Yeah.
So this is, we can speculate all we want about Boeing, but this was something that was said on Tim Pool's show, on Timcast, by a former Democratic congressman. Kucinich? No. Yeah. Dennis Kucinich.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were sitting there talking about, like, I don't know, people coming and asking for lobbying and all of this crap. And he said that it used to be, he's a retired congressman, so it used to be that people would come into his office, he said, from Boeing, and they were trying to get him to change a law that allowed Boeing to be able to basically show technology to the Chinese. But the reason was because Boeing wouldn't couldn't sell airplanes in China unless they had a deal where China made the landing gear or whatever piece of technology it was for them to install on the aircraft. And so they had to be able to like show some kind of like trade secret to China to gain access to the Chinese market, but that was technically illegal because it was a sanctioned communist country. And so they were trying to get Boeing was trying to get Congress to work around that. And now Boeing is up shit creek, you might have noticed. They've now decommissioned, they've made their last, this is a little technical, but their last 777-300ER, they're not making anymore, it doesn't look like. They're like crashing, or the news is saying they're crashing all over the place. There's all these Boeing problems. They get this huge attack. Last time I was here in Austin, I was on Rogan's show, and I gave him this whole like rundown. I was like, no, what's happening is the Chinese manufacturer Comac is rising and they're stealing Boeing technology. And it's like they thought there was like, oh, we want to make lots of money. We'll be friends with China, or whatever. We'll let them make the landing gear, which is already scary enough because then they get all the technology to build advanced landing gear.
Right.
And I don't know if that also involved, that's all commercial. I don't know if it also involved, Boeing's military contract stuff to be able to get into the market. So if you think that if these guys, not you, because you seem to be a little more street smart than make deal with China. If these guys think there's going to ever be reciprocity with a totalitarian closed door system that firewalls everything, like they're releasing, what is it? Red Note, which is actually literally Little Red Book.
Yeah.
Like Xiaohongshu. They're releasing this into the United States. They're whatever with TikTok. That one's like
and then
granted
new
will come.
AI.
Now they got their DeepSeek AI, and it's like screwing up our stock market or whatever. And meanwhile, you can't even like open Twitter in China.
Yeah.
Like
that's what Elon was
you
saying.
have to have like a VPN. There's not going to be reciprocity.
Yeah.
The thing with which one was it? Was with Red Note with Little Red Book? They literally freaked out because all these Westerners jumped on so quickly in some weird coordinated push, mostly among conservatives, by the way, which is super weird. All this pro-CCP propaganda coming from conservatives all of a sudden. And they all jump onto this thing. And then the Chinese are like, oh, crap. Chinese people can see Western content. And they're scrambling to shut that down. This is not how they play.
Those were
right?
some of the funniest videos were like the Chinese people being like, get your gay shit out of here, basically. Like, take your content away from here. We don't want it.
I mean, they've been using the word Baisoa for a long time, white left.
Yeah.
And they don't like it.
Yeah, yeah.
They don't like it. And then they kicked Nick Fuentes off like that. And he was like, I want to go there because it doesn't censor me. And they booted him before he posted anything.
Like, why do you attribute what do you think that is going on with the kind of right-wing Chinese propaganda or even like Russian propaganda in some respects?
There are kind of a handful of explanations that
because I thought they were like America
First
First people, so I would think you would be more isolationist, and which I understand. I understand the isolationist part. I don't understand I guess is it just like we like dictators?
Do you understand we like money?
You
remember
do you
Tenet
understand
Media?
Capitalism always wins?
Yeah. Do you understand that we like money?
I do understand that.
It's
apparently not enough because I'm not rich.
That is not that's not the only kind of explanation, but that is a very simple explanation. Some people might be. I have no evidence of anybody. I'm not accusing anybody. Some people probably are, in fact, being paid. The Chinese, as the stereotype goes, are tricky. You may not have, some guy whose last name is Chan showing up in like
with a briefcase,
with a briefcase and a checkbook. Would you like to write some tweets for us? Yeah, and gold
from Costco.
Yeah, you're probably gonna have somebody that's not directly connected, who's a couple layers in. Would you let's like the Tenet Media thing, right?
Right.
$10 million coming in from
but
Russia.
Even that was like some random European guy that had no real history at all.
Yeah.
Like even that was a little suspicious.
A little suspicious. Like I would love to know what was going on, not to call him out, but in Tim Pool's mind, when it was like, we're going to give you $100,000 a week and this is totally normal.
He justifies it though.
I know.
He's like, these are average rates for someone of his caliber.
Of his caliber. Can we wash his shoes before we leave? Oh my God.
I mean, caliber.
Yeah.
Those are, if you're getting millions of downloads, you can command hundreds of thousands of dollars in
I guess. I mean, nobody ever asks me for this ever. I think they know that I would rat them out.
This.
Like I
for
I
as
do
much
suck
of
at this.
grifters as we are called, we really suck at it.
I am like
every time I'm
worst
a middle
ever
seat
grifter.
coach, I'm like, I can't believe I get called a grifter online.
Yeah, no joke, right? It's like they're like, who pays you? And there's some rumor, by the way. You know what? You asked me earlier what I get misrepresented with, but there's a rumor. This isn't a misrepresentation. This is, like they're like people think Israel's paying me. They think the CCP's paying me. They think that I have all these like weird shadowy funders, and I'm like,
I wish,
dude. Like, what are you talking about? No, I have Patreon. Like,
yeah.
Please send $5, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, do you think I'd be, you're like, I am one day away from going on, what's that fucking site, Cameo?
Yeah, right?
You're like, I'm just a couple more nervous breakdowns away from Cameo.
Yeah, that's right.
So what do you attribute, like what do you consider the woke right? And here's my issue with what I see sometimes from the new, like this. I also hate this term, the IDW.
Whoa, that's a word I haven't heard in a while.
I know it's so 2018. But that kind of space, as they, you know, I'm not part of that because I'm just part of the dark web part. Let's say that people got pushed right. I think even I'm not a conservative by any means, but I think the criticism is that these people are now trying to gatekeep the right in a way that seems like it's because of moral reasons or purity reasons, or we need to purge some of the badness on the right, when really it's just like competing for market share.
Yeah, there's, I think, a lot of puritanism as competing for market share going on. The right seems to have, you know, realized, I think, ahead of the game that it was going to get a taste of power. Now it has, I don't know what it means to say the right has power. Trump has power. I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but the right has power, and they've all gone nuts. And you can definitely see that scramble to be who's going to be at the top of the pile, who's going to be near the White House, who's going to be this, who's going to be that.
I love it.
And that's typical, but the amount of mind losing, it's like, I think there are elements where it has been led, where it has been orchestrated. Like I mentioned, the Russian propaganda, the bots are very extreme. A lot of the Nazi content on X is coming from Russian sources. That's designed to drag in, unfortunately, our veterans and teenage boys primarily into that crap. And why they have like willing compatriots in the conservative movement, I'm not entirely sure, but I like money too. And so I'm assuming that's what it is. But what you can get dragged along in this kind of like enthusiasm, right? Money doesn't even have to be involved.
Right.
And then you've got to figure out how to compete for market share, and being a little edgier and a little hard. I'm not just rejecting the left. I'm rejecting it a little harder. Everything, in fact, maybe that the left said that was bad, some of it's actually good. Maybe, in fact, Mustache Man was good, and they go on and on and on. And the thing is, it doesn't matter. Like the old saying is, it doesn't really matter. There's no such thing as bad press, right? All press is good press. Just spell my name right. And if they come out and say something like that everything we learned about World War II was a lie, or that maybe the Mustache Man that's Hitler for people not paying attention, had some good solutions, then they're going to go viral.
Right.
They're going to go viral because they did the edgy thing. And some people, 90% of them are going to be mad. There's a book about this style of marketing that allegedly, I don't know if it's true, that Milo Yiannopoulos allegedly studied in order to do his kind of shock jock thing 10 years ago. That book was called Trust Me, I'm Lying. People can look it up. It's an interesting read, but it's like, I don't know. It's like if this dark tome should even be out there here after I've recommended it. But I think it's important because people do know about this, right? But this and so you want to be able to insulate yourself or inoculate yourself against, this kind of manipulation. But the fact is that edgelording is its own energy, right?
Yeah.
And if you're trying to compete to have like the biggest show that gets the most views, you're not going to get a clip that goes like mega viral unless you say something a little bit out there.
Yeah.
And there becomes this competition. And then there's like, I'm not joking, I think there's actually like the dynamics with the young men and women, I think there's a sexual dynamic to it, not in the direct sense, but sexual competition, right? So you have young women who are rightly horrified by some of the very awful things they're seeing with crime from illegal immigrants and so on. They want to feel safe. And then you have guys that are like, I won't just deport them. I'll deport them all. I'll find the legal ones to get rid of everybody with the wrong color skin. I'll get rid of them too for you, baby. And there's this weird, like, I can do the edgier, harder thing more to impress the girl who's they're all kind of dipping in this madness together. I think that that's actually part of how they've radicalized themselves. But I cannot leave out that this is also driven. There are, if that's like a bunch of, we'll say, sheep moving in a direction, there are sheepdogs and there are guys with whips making it go where they want it to go behind it. And those people are foreign governments. They might be deep state. They might just be, people who want to see the world burn. I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
I do know foreign governments do this for certain.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny to see how it reminds me, because Trump has power, yes, but the thing that I'm most fascinated with, because it is more my lane, is just like culture.
Yeah.
And as I've mentioned many times before at this point on this podcast, I've never lived through a time where the right was cool.
Yeah.
That's just not, and I can't think of a time in America when that was even the case. So yes, they may have had some power politically, and they may have had power in the judicial power or Supreme Court. But when was it that like they were, people were doing like the Trump dance and athletes, and like the young men are kind of like, yay, right wing. Generally, there is that old saying of like, if you're not a leftist in your 20s, and if you're not, and this has been completely inverted now.
Yeah, it's a complete inversion. It's flipped over on its head. And that's a ton of energy. And some of it's very organic and real, and some of it's going to get co-opted because, look at, a lot of people don't understand this. So it's talked about social media being very fake. If something divisive starts to go viral, some debate or something starts to go viral, it doesn't matter what the issue is. And there's going to be people like, women shouldn't be in the kitchen. Women should be in the kitchen. It could be anything.
Repeal
like
the 19th.
Yeah, right.
That's my favorite.
I promise you that the foreign influence networks
Jump
are
on
on that within hours.
Right.
And they're seeding.
Right.
So what they'll do is get in people's replies, and, you got one guy with 75 phones or whatever, and what he's going to do, or 75 accounts, what he's going to do is 3 fairly reasonable comments that agree with your position, and then one that's like, gas the juice. And they do, this is the strategy.
I'm not laughing at that, but I get it.
It's an unexpected thing to have said in that moment. But yeah, that's the strategy though, right? Is to take it to the next thing, like to just seed the next more extreme thing. So you're getting all this affirmation in your replies for the extreme thing that you've already declared, or for the extreme position that they want to like take further. And then a handful, some percentage, 5, 10, 20% of the replies are going to get more extreme. And they tend to get more extreme over time. Here's an example, not of that specific thing, but where you could see there was over Christmas, almost everybody saw this ridiculous debate about H-1B visas that just came out of nowhere, right? Well, you could see it started with some influencers, and then it started to get really ugly, and then it got really like, do we really believe this? And then all of a sudden, I started to see
the has no job.
Well, what I saw though was a bunch of the influencers who were very hard in the paint at the beginning were like, whoa, 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 whoa. You could see they lost control of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guess what happened? I don't have proof that I can, produce for you, but I can guess what happened.
What happened?
An influence network decided, probably Qatari or Russian or Pakistani. Pakistan hates India.
Yeah.
Who hates India? Like, start, doing the math.
Yeah.
Who can disrupt it?
Who doesn't?
Gets involved and starts pushing the issue and taking it deliberately steps further than it's supposed to go over the course of 3 or 4 days, to where all of a sudden the influencers who started the whole thing are like, whoa, what's happening? Right? And this wasn't what we were saying. And you can see that they kind of can lose control of it. I think the reason for that isn't that the debate lost control of itself, but rather that there are entities pouring gasoline or spraying gasoline like flamethrower into it to drive it in particular directions.
Yeah, that's what's interesting is you have the influencers who are kind of like leading the sheep, but then they lose control of the sheep at some point.
That's like the story of like every mob ever, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what is your concern? As we sit here, what is your concern with the right? Like, why did you kind of come up with this? Is there a real Christian nationalist problem that we should be concerned with? Or is it overwrought?
Well, according to the pastors I'm talking to around the country, because I speak at a lot of churches now. Maybe that's ironic, I don't know. But I speak in a ton of churches. And I
and you don't
talk to a lot of pastors. And this same issue, it's like a lot of them are telling me this is the number one issue now in their church, that young men under 40 are almost, you almost can't talk to them. They don't want to hear anything from anybody that's elder in the church. They have very radical views. A lot of them don't even have families or relationships and don't seem to want one. They're just there and kind of intense, and that this is a leading problem, at least in certain areas in the country, northern Idaho, northern Utah, parts of Arizona and Florida.
My first guess would have been northern Idaho, by the way.
Well, yeah, they called it literally the Moscow mood. You got the glass, I almost said mule. Copper mug. That even the pastor who started that.
Shout out to Russia, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. Even the pastor
is signing to them.
Do they have ginger beer like natively in Russia though? I don't think they do.
I don't know,
but Lysenko said that he would get oranges to grow in Siberia if given long enough to teach them Soviet theory. So maybe you could get the lime at least. No, even the pastor who kind of started that Moscow mood, northern Idaho thing, Doug Wilson, is now like, holy crap, they all hate Jews. What do I do? And like, I just saw a video this morning while I was flying in today. I'm like, he's talking and he's like, this is wrong, guys. Like he's lost control of it, right? It's gone beyond him. And so I'm hearing that this is a major problem in kind of the church networks all over, with a lot of like Southeast Tennessee, Southwest Tennessee, both there, again, the same. I have friends in both areas who are saying this is like a major problem in our churches. So I think it's
anti-Semitism.
Some, but it's mostly this like we can't vote our way out of this. Like this weird like black pill. Everything's despair. We need very radical solutions.
But God,
almost.
But also God.
Well, in a manner of speaking, usually very strict interpretations of what God does and doesn't like. It's almost, getting into that kind of almost puritanical flavor with these guys. And I'm hearing
those... it sounds a little bit like any religious extremism is just... It sounds like I'm going to be in a burqa soon,
Yeah, right. And so you asked me really kind of like, what am I worried about with this whole broader phenomenon? I think the Christian nationalist issue, however big it is embedded. It's like the Narnian version, because like I call the Christian world Narnia, which they take as flattering, which I'm glad they do because I sort of mean it that way. But it's also removed, right? The mainstream America, it does not know what's going on in the Southern Baptist Convention and does not care. But it's like big politics inside the Southern Baptist or inside Narnia, right? So the Christian nationalist thing is like the Narnian version of the bigger woke right phenomenon, post-liberal, wanting to, think of a new order that doesn't follow, individual liberty and property rights as the primary drivers and so on. And what I'm afraid of, in fact, with a lot of the radicalism in particular, I don't think that this is meant to win. I don't actually have a sincere fear yet that, we're going to lurch, although what I'm seeing with some young people or reports about young people is very concerning, that we're going to lurch into, 1933, 1934 Germany all of a sudden. What I'm actually more concerned about is that in 2026, the year of our Lord next year, we now have an election in which a lot of people were scared and held their nose and said, I'll vote for Trump. And they're going to be like, whoops, time to vote for Democrats again.
Right.
Right.
That's
and all
the way
the
it
Democrats
always
have to do, and they're not doing a great job so far, but all they have to do is remain modestly sane.
They can't, though.
I don't know. They can't. The thing is, the culture side can't, but the politicians can. The politicians can come in and just say straight economic populism. They can blame everything on Elon Musk. It's the billionaires. It's the billionaires. It's the billionaires. And start to sound totally sane and hit that, Bernie bro base and get them reactivated that it's not all about race and sex and sexuality, they can even start to find
Bernie
ways.
Bro base voted for Trump, though.
I know. The goal, I think, would be to bring them back.
I mean, this is what
Because
I've
they're
been
not
saying.
probably, well, they might be down with the anti-Semitism. I don't know.
Right. So you think it will be, I don't know. I don't know, because the culture has been so like the Palestine stuff is so embedded in the young people to be to have rightfully empathy for the suffering of the Palestinian people without. And this was something that I noticed even amongst normies in my own life, is that they would send me these videos from certain huge influencers just asking questions. And they're like, why is this? But they don't know enough about the history of anti-Semitism to recognize that it's actually anti-Semitism.
Right.
So they'll be sending me a video. I'm like, this is an ancient anti-Semitic trope. And they're like, no, it's just like, they're just asking questions. And so this is...
Imagine you being somebody that's at peacetime in your day-to-day life, being exposed to outright war propaganda in a war that you don't understand with historical context that you don't have.
Yeah.
And how you'd react to it.
But also, like, on TikTok, these kids don't think Helen Keller was real. Like,
That reminds me, though. Do you know why Helen Keller wasn't good at driving?
Do I want to know?
Because she's a woman.
Yeah, it's... I was talking to Kat D just yesterday for this podcast, and I love her, takes and thoughts on media and whatnot. And she thinks there's going to be some kind of re-centralization, or legacy media is going to have to reassert itself because it's so fractured that no one knows what to believe anywhere. But I feel like that's very optimistic to think that. I'm like, I don't think there's any going back. But so how does one mentally inoculate themselves in order to? And I was talking to this about my husband. Like, you'll hear something from someone who's maybe got some extreme views, and then they have views that you're like, well, they're not wrong about that. But how do you navigate this time as just a normie?
That's insanely hard. And by the way, my phrase for that is, we are the fake news now. Because it's like, we're the media now, is what you always hear from the conservative.
I know. That's what I've been saying.
No, we are the fake news now, guys.
Exactly.
We are the fake news now.
I just love that you're like, well, the New York Times is bullshit, so I'm going to believe this fucking random dude in his basement. Like, he's clearly got it all together.
It would be so much harder to buy him, too, right? Like how much is it going to cost? Like, life-changing money for that guy is like $60,000. Whereas what are you going to do with a New York Times editor?
And for all you want to say about these publications, you've worked with them. I've written for The Atlantic. They do actual fact checking. Like, they will reach out to people in your past and say, did Bridget go to this high school?
The fact checking, at least on that, is really rigorous.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it's mental, but it is rigorous. Like, they check everything.
Yeah. And there's not that on a podcast.
Turns out we're not fact checking anything.
No.
Actually, let's give some credit, because Rogan does. I said something on his show one time, and I got called a few days later and can you provide a source for this thing? Because it's the one thing we can't find. And I'm like, you guys looked it all up? And they're like, yeah, we check every single claim. And they couldn't find it, so I sent him the citation. It was academic, so I sent him the paper, and not Rogan. I think it's a Jamie or whatever. I sent him the paper. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, there it is. Okay. I don't think they check everything, but if it sounds pretty out there, they check it. But how do you navigate this?
How do you navigate?
You got to slow down. First of all, the pressure to throw takes or gasoline on the fire right now to get involved, to the Twitter expert phenomenon, I don't know, there was a gas leak somewhere, so now everybody's an expert in gas fittings today. Immediately within 5 minutes, everybody on the internet got a PhD in gas fittings. And
it's my favorite part of the internet.
Yeah, right. It's people who want to understand what's going on have got to there's got to be some stepping back.
Yeah.
Jesse Kelly talks about that a lot. for example, with any huge, like a school shooting or something happens, he's like,
Pause.
You pause. You don't
Yep.
have to talk about this for 48 hours. Let some dust settle.
Yep.
Let's see where it goes before you have to just dive in. So actually that's pulling some heat out of the kind of, escalation, the fire that's raging around these issues. But you have to almost double check off multiple sources, virtually everything, which is, on the one hand, we get to do our own research now. On the other hand, it turns out research is hard and it ups the level of research that you have to do. Of course.
But people don't really know how to do research.
They don't.
This is what my husband was saying. He's
They
like,
don't.
people who do their own research, like, don't know actually even how to do research.
And I used to tell people, you should, of course, find some people who have in the past provided receipts and shown that they know what they're talking about. But that's not good enough anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's actually really easy to go like string together a bunch of crap you found on 5 different Wikipedia sites and like create a convincing story about some war that you don't know anything about. Or just to like say 7 true things and then 3 really out there things on the back end of it. And you think, wow, that guy's really credible, and then
or
all
to
of a sudden,
take something that isn't hidden, it's just not studied as much as something else and say, oh, this is hidden because it's a conspiracy. It's well, no, we all know about this.
Well, that's a big one people got to watch out for, which is they don't want you to know that, therefore it's true.
Right.
Like that knowledge vetting approach is really bad, right?
But the fucking mainstream media did this.
They sure
and
did.
I'm furious at them for it because they
did.
broke people's brains over COVID. They lied. All these journalists abdicated their duties of just pursuing truth and trying to go viral or trying to be on the right side of history or be with the right party or go to the right parties. And now you don't really know who or what to believe.
It's very, very difficult.
And it's very easy to manipulate a population like that.
That's right. And a lot of people who have good heads on their shoulders don't want to deal with it and check out.
And this is where I am like, am I one of those people?
The check out people or
who's been manipulated?
Oh, yeah, we all are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We all are. It's like, again, are you crazy?
Is this why I voted for Trump? Like I was just manipulated.
Yeah.
And my sister said something really insightful. She was like, if the algorithm is just feeding us what we want, aren't we all radicalizing ourselves? I was like, we are.
We are. Well, to your question about, were you manipulating voting for Trump? The answer is maybe, but shall we watch a few videos of Kamala Harris? Can it bring you back to earth?
But also you have the lies about him.
Oh, yeah.
Like it should be a fucking huge scandal.
Well, I mean, this is like, so you asked me about me being misrepresented. This is like, I wake up every day to discover a me that I've never known before. Like, who am I today, according to the internet, right? Internet.com says that I am now, the biggest misrepresentation to answer that question was that I hate Christians. This drumbeat is happening everywhere. This is happening on shows. It's happening in DMs. It's happening in text messages.
That you're like
it's happening
sent to
in the
undermine
White House.
Christianity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am a secret mole to undermine Christianity by reading the gospel.
And because you were an atheist and
must be, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like Jesus, if you actually, I'm not supposed to talk about the Bible because I'm, the underhanded guy. Do you know, maybe you don't know, what is the one thing that's warned about most in the Bible?
False idols.
False teachers, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. They're like, people will pretend to be good guys and be lying, wolves in sheep's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so they're like, well, James must be that because he's not a brother. And I'm like, do I have to go like put on like a special outfit to be a brother? Like, do I have to, do you think if Russell Brand put on his underpants and took me into the river that I would count?
I made a video about this. I haven't released it yet.
I bet I wouldn't count. I bet you if Russell Brand baptized me and gave me one of his, our amulets that I still wouldn't count.
Isn't this against Christianity? Like even the woman who does my eyebrows is very Christian, and she was like going off about this one day because she's like, no, you don't need an amulet to protect you. You need God. It's like, this is idolatry.
The armor of God is not a $275 amulet sold by Russell Brand. No, the reason I bring him up though, specifically with this, is because I said, I don't think that guy's real. as in his conversion, his Christianity. I don't think he's real. Like his history, the guy's an actor. He just got accused of a bunch of sexual assault. Now all of a sudden he found God.
And then the whole right's like, we love you.
And he's on stage praying with Tucker Carlson like the next day. And I'm like, no, right? And people were like, James hates Christians. And I was like, oh my gosh. It's like.
I put it much more simply than this. Why can't people detect a scumbag in their midst? Like, no matter which party, it seems like partisanship has, and maybe it's because I'm a female, but I'm like, Gavin Newsom, scumbag. Russell Brand seems like a scumbag. Like, why are scumbag detectors so broken by partisan politics that you have allowed these literal and sometimes predators to just move seamlessly from one place to another, whether it's a male to a female prison, whether it is
like that one's a no-brainer,
an influencer who's just like conveniently becoming something so that they can pivot out of, whatever bad press they might be getting.
Yeah.
An
influencer who didn't exist a year ago and now has a million followers because he had one weird video that went viral for like whatever. Yeah. So it
seems like people should be better attuned to just recognizing scumbags.
You would think so. I went to DC. I was at the Trump DC back when it was the Trump DC. So it was a long time ago. And, I won't name any names, but I was with a group of people and they called this guy over who's a famous person or was a famous person sort of in conservative circles. And the second I met this guy.
Matt Gaetz.
No comment. No, it was not Matt Gaetz.
I'm just kidding.
So I know Matt. He's all right. As soon as I met this guy though, like just look in his eyes,
on
right?
Cameo now.
Yeah. As soon as I saw the look in this guy's eyes, I was like, oh, this guy's a sociopath, right? And then he started talking, and it's like we were talking. He wanted to talk to me about the grievance studies papers, and I was telling him about it. And like some of those papers are pretty damn funny, right?
Yeah.
And it was just like talking to a board. And then there was some story somebody told about like somebody getting like hurt, and it wasn't a funny story. And the guy just started laughing hysterically. And I'm like, holy crap, this guy's a psycho. And everybody else that I was with was like, oh, he's really interesting. He's really great. And I'm like, how do you not see it? What's going on?
I see this in tech too. This happens in tech. I was at this event and this guy who's very famous was talking and I was like getting chills down my spine and everyone's just like, money.
Yeah, money.
And I'm like, we should be fucking. I looked at this guy sitting next to me. I'm like, am I the only one who's terrified by what this guy is saying? And he's like, no, he needs to be. He's like the only other normal dude. He's like, he needs to be stopped.
Do you know that with this whole woke right thing, I quoted you. I didn't put your name on it, so you got no credit. But I quoted
so
you.
You didn't actually quote me.
I did quote you. I plagiarized you.
Yeah, thank you.
I stole one of the most, I think, important things that
Dave Rubin.
that you ever said, though, to
you
me.
You Rubined me.
Well, not exactly. When I started to see in September, October, like the right gearing up to kind of go like buck wild with all this like radical stuff. And I've been tracking all this for a while.
You.
And I said, one of the most important things to know is when to leave a party that's about to go sideways. And that was something you told me. And I was like, no shit. That's 100% true. And I was like, this whole movement, this weird, like high energy conservative Inc-ish movement is all about to get weird.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got to get distance. Like, I've got to get distance from this. And I didn't deliberately create distance by going provoking things, but I was like, I've also got to speak up. Do it?
Maybe.
No. I wanted, is like, I needed psychological distance and I needed to know that I could speak up to differentiate myself from the crowd as I watched it kind of like running enthusiastically, not the wrong way, but a little bit the wrong way. You know that like a little bit off course, not straight, but a little sideways.
Yeah.
Right? Like, here's a historical story. Once upon a time, there was a Korean Air flight 747 took off. I don't remember the detail where it took off from. Maybe it was from Japan. I don't think it was from Japan. I think it was from somewhere in Seattle or something like that. But it was a Korea Air and it was flying obviously to Seoul Incheon Airport. And it was back in the 80s. And so they set the heading on it was dials, right? And they set it off by 1 degree wrong. 1 degree. Yeah. So instead of flying whatever heading they thought they were 1 degree sideways.
Yeah.
Which took them over Soviet airspace.
Yeah.
So the Soviets were like, there's no way they would send a passenger plane over our airspace. They're not that stupid. they must be disguising a spy plane as a passenger jet, scrambled and shot it down, killed everybody. 1 degree off from the true course can have a really big consequence.
Especially like when you even like going into space, like anytime you start to what's interesting that I've noticed is people who were like, oh, James was so much like a canary in the coal mine. He was so ahead of the curve. He saw things that other people didn't see. Are now wrong. Like now they're like those same people are like, this guy's full of shit.
Yep, he was wrong all the time.
He couldn't possibly be seeing something on our side that might be problematic moving forward 10 years.
Yeah,
that wouldn't
no, he's just wrong and bad and evil, and don't invite him to things anymore.
What are the criticisms that you think are accurate?
I mean, I don't behave well on social media. That's totally fair if anybody ever says that. So I do look crazy. So I don't really
You're much more sane actually sitting with you than I.
Oh, yeah.
I thought I'd get here and you'd be like, hi, Bridget. How you doing?
I'm a little like, high strung lately, actually, but just a little. It's totally possible that and I think this is a very legitimate criticism that I get, that I am reading what I'm seeing, and it's what we've actually already been talking about, and that I am making out that in reality something is happening that's mostly a social media mirage, right? So that I'm overblowing the issue, that I'm seeing all these, Nazi accounts, but they're fake.
But this was something I wanted to talk to you about, because it does seem, even since you and I first saw one another in Aspen, that the distance between the virtual and actual is getting smaller and
That's
smaller.
That's what I say.
Smaller.
I say that Twitter, or X, I guess, is California. Whatever happens in California hits the rest of the country in 5 to 10 years. Whatever happens in social media is happening in the movements, the political movements, within a year.
Right.
And so I'm like, this is really a concerning trend. And I don't actually know how much of it's real. But
even if it's not real, it becomes real.
It becomes real.
Right.
And what actually struck me kind of, this isn't what actually tipped me over and said, I've got to start talking about this. There was something else that was very discreet, like this, I've got to start speaking up. What actually convinced me that this is a big problem in reality was when I went to North Idaho and I was working with a pastor there at a church, and we held a meeting of a whole bunch of pastors, like a pastor moot or something, or whatever they call that when 30 pastors get in a room and we have, some kind of deli lunch. And we talked, and I was telling them about, literally, I got brought in to talk about queer theory and how it's impacting the schools and the children and what it all is. And I talked a little bit about that, and I talked a little bit about the big picture with, China and ESG and all of the highfalutin World Economic Forum stuff with them. And then I was like, well, let's just take the rest of the time and do like, what's on your mind, right? What are your problems? Maybe I have some color I can put on them. And they're like one guy after another is just like groypers. The groypers are our number one problem in our church. And I'm like, the what? Really? Like, I know what the groypers are, but I'm like,
you're like, I
they're
thought they
real?
were just on the internet. Yeah, exactly.
Like, they do things in life. Like, and
I had this recent experience, but go on.
So I was like, oh crap, this isn't like a couple of guys saying this. This is a whole bunch of them. And that they're all talking like this is a major problem in regional, both church and Republican Party politics that they're facing now. And that they've realized these guys are very dishonest. They come in and they act like they're normal people, but they have very radical intentions. So it's like intentional infiltration. And then everywhere they go, there's division and all this. And I'm like,
toxic.
I'm hearing
They're
this
toxic.
from my buddy and
again,
two buddies in
how can you not
Tennessee.
recognize toxic people?
I know. And I'm hearing this is happening in a few different places in Tennessee where I live. I'm hearing, reports that it's just out of control in the Ogden, Utah area. I'm hearing reports from it happening in churches in those communities in parts of Oklahoma. And I'm like scratching my head thinking maybe this is like, coming off the internet now.
Right.
Like it's one thing to say that the groypers are a huge, like weird issue on the internet. They're annoying. If they decide to descend upon you, they'll mess up your internet for 3 days till they get bored and,
Yeah, they might swat you.
They might swat you. They did dox
like that's
me.
a real life thing that they did. They'll dox you,
Yeah.
But like the actual
that
real
happened
life.
to me. I had to talk to the police so we don't get swatted. And no, they said that this was the biggest issue, even with all the woke left stuff happening. This is the biggest issue, and that it's kind of taken over the politics in Boise. They're all kind of concerned about that, and I'm like,
I mean, this is what we've talked about though in the past, is that I think you and I have had this discussion probably on the podcast, just like the as concerning as the extreme left is what the reaction will be from the right.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember having that conversation with you, in like 2019.
Yeah.
Like, we were, there's actually, I did trigonometry when it was like the smallest podcast in Britain or whatever back in 2019.
I'm sure Constantine will love that.
We talked about it when I was, it was at the time. He and I talked, I was just on his show, now that it's huge, I was just on his show a few months ago. I went out to Beverly Hills the day after the election. I was like, oh no, there's like MAGA hats, people walking around in red. I'm like, oh, everything's different now.
Yeah, well, Beverly Hills has always been MAGA.
Yeah. So
that's where like all the rallies were for Trump in 2016.
So I talked to him about it then, and he was like, yeah. But I went on his show, and one of the main things, it was Peter Boghossian and I together, we talked about with him was the fear that this was going to trigger a real racist reaction, a real like bid for patriarchy or whatever else. I don't think we had anti-Semitism like on the radar yet. But it was, yeah, no kidding. It was extremely concerning that the reaction was going to be, and that was 6 years ago.
See, the reason for me that it was always concerning was because it was the anti-Semitism on the left that pushed me out of the left.
Yeah.
So I was like, if this, and you see it on the right, but I'm like, if you see this on the left and you see this on the right, generally historically that's not a fucking good sign.
No, that's the Jew squeeze. I think they call it something like I think I mean, I've talked to some of my Jewish friends, and they do refer to a squeeze that comes from both sides on the Jewish people. And
you're like, oh, so and it does feel like there's some fucking weird thing that's encoded in human DNA that's like, it's the Jews.
It's the Jews. Well, what it is I mean, on a deep like psychological and philosophical level, I mean, I really do mean this. I've been thinking about this for a very long time, and I finally hit upon this answer the other day, and I'm like, oh my God, that's the right answer. And I didn't come up with it, but I don't remember where I read it. So somebody gets credit, and it's probably you. No, I'm just kidding. It definitely wasn't you.
Who are you quoting now?
Yeah, right. Quoting now. But
I love this marketplace of ideas where everyone just takes ideas.
There's too many ideas to remember where they came from.
I know.
So, but the thing is that the idea is that on a deep level, it's collectivism versus not collectivism, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're trying to create global oneness, which is what a lot of like the hippy dippy sounding religions are trying to do, but it's also what all the evil cult religions try to do. Communism's a global oneness program. Fascism's a global oneness program. If you're trying to create a global oneness theosophical or whatever thing, and you have a group of people that are like, no, we're God's chosen people, we're not doing that. They refuse to assimilate to whatever the big prevailing thing is. And then they also tend to, be very successful.
They're like the original edgelords.
Just
kidding.
They refuse. And so they're not going to be a part of a global oneness program. They're like, no, we've got a covenant, and that covenant is sacred and it's inviolable. And then people look at that and they're like, well, they're weirdos and we have problems. And where are the problems coming from? Well, we got these weirdos who are different from us, who won't get on the program with us. And what I've seen studying, totalitarian ideologies now for a while, you kind of got two kinds of tyranny, right? You've got the warlord tyranny, where it's just some guy who's a brute who takes everything over. Maybe that's like Genghis Khan or whatever, or maybe even Alexander. Then you have these kind of ideological tyrannies. And these ideological tyrannies are always of the same flavor. They have different actual, formula, but they're the same flavor. And that flavor is always, if everybody did this with us, it would work. So then you look at the people who aren't doing it with you, and it's not working because it's bullshit in the first place. And you're like, it's their fault.
Well, this was something that really struck me when I was in Prague, and we had this amazing tour guide. He spoke like 14 languages. He was born and raised in Prague and educated with the Russian history, and then lived through the last Russian tanks leaving in the 90s.
Wow.
And had to relearn history, which would be insane, and was also Jewish. And he took us down to where the ghettos were and the old and the walls and whatnot. And he was explaining that during the plague, because the Jews had been put in basically their own, ghetto, and had been they had better sanitation and they had to get all of it out one way or another, and therefore were not as affected by the plague, and then they were blamed for the plague.
Of course.
Like, it's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
It's like they were isolated. They had to deal with that and come up with better practices around hygiene. And then because they didn't get it, it was their fault.
It was their fault. Yeah.
While there's shit in the streets.
Well, I've got guys out there right now saying that it's my weak ass takes on communism, apparently, that have turned young people into like Nazi ideology. I don't think this is true. I think they're trolling, but there are people saying this now. So you have some, like, I wake up every day and I'm like, who am I going to find today? You know,
you can't. I mean, I come from the Joe Rogan school of internet. It's like post and ghost. Don't read the comments. Just don't argue with people online all day. You need one of those calendars that's like, here's how many days you have left in your lifetime if you're lucky enough to live to 80 or whatever. And I think it will help put things like that. Time is valuable.
It is valuable.
Yeah.
The thing is, I got kicked off Twitter, right, for 5 months for calling trans activists groomers. And
I remember that.
Yeah, so
it was good for you though, right?
Well, yes and no. I was very happy to be off, actually. And I think at first, especially. But the problem was I was insanely productive. I was so productive. I was like doing some of the best research I think I've done this whole time. My output was like killing people. Like they couldn't read everything I was writing and listen to everything I was recording as podcasts fast enough. Like I was just
burying people.
Yeah, I was just like, I was like the Concorde, like flying past everything. And then all of a sudden, about it was 5 months total, about 3.5 months in, I was like, I started to realize that it's like, I'm over here and like I don't know what people think of what I'm saying now. Like I've become disconnected. I don't have that feedback mechanism.
Right.
And so part of the reason that I read the comments is because I don't know how my stuff is being received without seeing how it's being received. Like when I was saying earlier, talking with an audience, you can see their faces.
Right.
Like if they all start kind of doing this.
But if you yourself are saying a lot of it is manufactured and fake. So how can you determine how you're being received and if it's even fake or real?
I'm realizing that that's like this huge issue now, and I'm trying to calibrate around it, and I don't know what to do, because that's a huge problem, right? If you want to make a claim that something's happening, like that there's this woke thing happening in the right wing or a fascist or a Nazi or whatever, you need examples to show people, right?
I mean, maybe that's why it bothers me, the woke thing, is that it's not, it feels like on the left, they labeled it cultural Marxism. So is it Marxism or is it like Nazism?
Well, some of some people are like National Socialists. I don't think most of them are. And I think a lot of that's troll activity.
Right.
There's this weird line between like the philosophical school of capital C conservatism, which is not what most people politically that are conservative call themselves. It's actually a school of thought. It has like kind of outlined ideas. It's rooted, deeply in tradition and so on and all this stuff. And a lot of conservatives, when they hear it, would say, yeah, I think that way. But there's a school of thought. And then that's like conservatism. And then you have fascism, right? And they're not the same thing.
Right.
Because fascism is all invested in the state. But where they kind of overlap is a lot of times in this sense of a nation as a people that have shared things in common. Not as a nation, as in like this kind of political entity where there's a constitution and everybody who happens to live within the borders and is a legal citizen, blah, blah, blah. But no, it's a distinct people who have kind of an ethnic heritage that somehow ties them together. And they both kind of have this way of thinking, and that who you are is determined in terms of like your inheritance from that national culture, right? You could call it an inherited self versus, like a self-defined self that the left is into. I get to be whoever I want today. I'm going to change my pronouns every Tuesday at 12. That's self-definition versus this is, well, you don't really get to pick who you are because your society gave you who you are. And you inherited that, and it would be like, rude it'd be an insult to throw it off and say, I'm going to be different than the traditions.
But that's almost like a caste system.
The thing it can go that way. It can get very hierarchical. But the thing is that like the fascist side is like, it's the same thing where the Marxists believe like, oh, we can just be progressive. Oh, it's not working. We need state power to force people to be progressive, right? The fascist thing is like, oh, we can just have a big national community and we can think of ourselves as the national community, which by the way is the phrasing that the Nazis used for what they were building, is a national community. And we're going to have this national community. Oh shit, we can't actually make people like respect it. So we'll use the state to force them to do it. And so capital C conservatism doesn't believe in the state forcing people to do that, but fascism does. But then they have this huge amount of like blurry crossover between them in that place. And again, the
In what place?
In that place of who we are as a people is something everybody, in order for the society to work, everybody has to understand who we are as a people and be kind of on the same program. And the fact is when people are, the question always comes down to, what do you do with the people who say no?
Right.
Right? Well, like, fine, that's a tradition, but I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to. What do you do with the people who say no? And eventually, if your thought process is that society will decohere, it will fall apart, something terrible will happen if we don't make sure everybody's on the program, then eventually you have to start forcing people to be on the program.
Right.
It can start through coercion, then it can get to like kind of the puritanical cancel culture, and eventually you end up with a state apparatus that's like, this is what we're doing, and if you don't participate, you're not part of us, and you don't have any,
And then it becomes
you're
a
in the
program.
ghetto.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so there's this weird space there where it's like some of both of those things are happening, but one of those things is really bad. And just like on the left, it's like, you know, hippy dippy, progressive, kumbaya kind of people. Can't we all just get along? And can't we all just like gay people or whatever? Like that slope into like whatever the hell we just lived through is slippery.
Yeah.
Right? This slope, now concentrated in the concept of what it means to be a nation, is also slippery.
Right.
And that's where my primary concern is. And it's also, it turns out in both cases, I'm reading this book right now called Account Rendered about a girl who was 15 in 1933 when Hitler took over. And she became a Nazi almost immediately. And so in the late 50s or early 60s, I don't know the exact timing, she had finally like deprogrammed. And her best friend as a teenager was this Jewish girl. And so she's like writing this letter, not of apology, but of explanation. How did I become a monster, basically, to her childhood friend? And I'm reading this, and it's so frequently reminding that young people get caught up in this.
Yeah.
It's the wanting to be a part of something big. It's wanting to change the world. It's, you know, we're 15, 16, 18 years old. Nobody quite takes us seriously, but this is a serious movement. This is life and death.
Right.
This is a real thing, and real people our age are really doing it. And that's, I see, well, Leonard Peikoff called this ominous parallels. I see ominous parallels between the situation that we're in now and the situation that you would have in those states that went into kind of the fascist pit. But how is it woke where like left woke cares about your race or what it means to be your race, right? It doesn't care about your race. That is a lie. That was always a lie. Larry Elder's black, but he wasn't black. The LA Times called him the blackface of white supremacy.
Right.
They cared about that he acted
Politically black.
Politically black, right?
Right.
Instead of it being about race or sexuality or one of these things that the left did, or economic status if it's old school Marxist, now it's concentrated in the idea of the nation. Who are we as a people that thinks of itself as a people? And they get the same thought processes about what defines the people in the nation. And so that's why there's so much.
But it's hard. Like, do you, sorry to interrupt. Do you think that, isn't there some level of truth to having to, one of the things on the left that has been so degrading has been the teaching of hating America.
Yeah.
So how do you cohere as a nation if your population hates itself?
No, that's right. And that's where this like it's reaction and overreaction, right? Because this woman, Melita Moshman, that wrote the book Account Rendered, actually says that too. It's like, was it hate that brought me into being a National Socialist, a Nazi? She was a Nazi officer, right? By the time it ended. Was it hatred that brought me in? She says, no, it was love for Germany. I wanted Germany to be this great vision, and I believed, this is her words, and I believed Hitler would deliver on those promises. And so that desire, the left and the communists destroying love of nation, patriotism, is extremely corrosive.
But that's the other weird thing,
But
because
it can
isn't
go both ways.
communism all about loving your nation too?
No. Communism is an internationalist movement.
But wasn't like the motherland in Russia, wasn't it about the love of Russia?
Well, there's a huge, I mean, this is a whole topic, but there was a program that was initiated. Stalin came up with it in 1913. In Russian, it's korenizatsia, which means putting down roots. And it's basically, we call it DEI today. And I'm not like basicallying my way around details. Like it is DEI is the import of korenizatsia. And so for the entire 1920s to roughly the end of the 1920s, getting into the early 1930s, they were doing this, whether it was Estonia, whether it was Latvia, Ukraine, whatever. They were going around and they were, no, you get to be your own people. You get to be your own nation within the broad federation, the Soviet Federation. And we're going to help you. Your leaders will become leaders in Moscow. And so there's your inclusion program, by the way. And all of this, it had the diversity component was called Raznobratia, which literally means diversity. And that means, as Lenin put it, diversity in form, but unity in content. So you look different, but you all think the same.
Right.
You're all Soviets. And so that was a disaster. It did exactly what DEI is doing now in America, where everybody kind of hates each other. And there's all this tension across racial or ethnic lines and all these issues. It fell apart in exactly the way one would predict it falls apart in what we've just walked through. And then Stalin was now in power. Lenin was dead, late 1920s, early 30s. And he says the new economic policy, the NEP, has to succeed Russification. No more, you're Latvian, you're Estonian, you're this, you're that, your nation, self-determination, blah, blah, blah. Nope, you're all Russian now. And he stopped calling it Soviet Union. Stalin stopped calling it the Soviet Union at that point and started calling it Russia. And that's when the huge motherland push was brought in. So it's like they DEI'd until it didn't work. And then dictator Stalin, with literally, Stalin is a nickname, by the way. It means something to do with steel in Russian. I forgot how to say his real last name. But Stalin, with his steel fist, was like, nope, now we're all going the other way. And so it became the massive Russification project that they initiated, which actually harkened back to before the Union. There was a Russification project under the Tsar as well.
Right.
So it's like, we're going to go DEI. Nope, we're going to go all the way back.
Okay.
And so the thing is, what they called Stalin for this was the National Socialist. That's what Lenin referred to him as because of these programs. And it was considered a derogatory term because it was supposed to be international socialism. The Soviet Union was supposed to be a test bed that would then be able to plant seeds of communism, one nation after another, whether it, went in and did a kind of color revolution or a coup, or whether it went in and toppled a nation. But the idea was it was going to be the like fortress, and communism was going to spread everywhere, and everything that tipped over would become part of the federation.
Okay.
So it's a little more complicated.
Okay. I
know there's a lot of like, what the hell?
No. It's I mean, this is again. I'm sitting here listening, going like, I don't know anything. And also,
but this is one of the memes that they're getting our young guys with, which is that international socialism doesn't work, but national socialism does.
Okay.
And you'll see that like that's repeated a lot. And I think it's from large propaganda accounts, and then people, it's memeable. They repeat it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this, because you're seeing it. Yeah.
My counter meme is socialism sucks, which it does.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't think like this administration is so pro-socialism. So what's the capitalist version, worst nightmare scenario here?
Oh, what we have in China right now. China in the 1980s had a leader named Deng Xiaoping. And a lot of people don't know who Deng Xiaoping is, but Deng Xiaoping, it wasn't the immediate successor of Mao. There was like a power struggle, and there was another guy for like a year and a half and whatever.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because weren't we just talking about him with Curtis Yarvin?
Deng Xiaoping?
Yeah, I think he was.
Deng Xiaoping's
him up.
an incredibly important figure.
Yeah.
And his motto
but he was
was
like, this is a good model.
no,
like
it's not a good model. Yeah. So Deng Xiaoping's idea was open up, right? That was his slogan. And the model was one country, two systems.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was going to continue to have the communist political ideology at its heart, but it was going to adopt literally the National Socialist, not the program, just the economic model.
Right.
Right. So a fascist economic model. So you get this communist fascist hybrid where you have people can make crazy money with their corporations. You can have whatever big corporation you want in China, and the CEO or the owner can make crazy money. But the deal is the state owns all the land, the state owns all the raw materials, the state owns all the heavy capital.
And they'll disappear you if you
and
get
will
too
disappear
rich.
you if you disagree with them
Yeah.
or disagree with CCP policy,
Right.
which could change tomorrow,
Right.
at any given time, or if you speak out against communism or the present leader or whatever, as has happened, Jack Ma,
Mhm.
right? And so I don't know why he decided his IPO launch was a good time to go into some invective about the CCP, but it wasn't a great timing for him, and that happens. So what you have is you don't have this like advanced super capitalist model. What you have is a Potemkin village of capitalism that operates at the communist state's pleasure, right? And so my broad thesis is that this whole, sustainability, ESG bullshit in the West is a way of doing that same thing upside down.
Right.
So now we're going to use we're not going to use the state to force the corporations. We're going to use the corporations to force the state.
Right.
So we'll get all the corporations working in lockstep, whether it's through, drunken deals at their ski party in Davos, whether it's through, UN agreements, whether it's through Club of Rome agreements or whatever these other shadowy organizations. They got some other ways that they do. The Council for Inclusive Capitalism has something like 700 of the biggest company CEOs together with the Pope, together with the Rothschilds. It's like, what the hell's going on there, right? And it's called
Human sacrifice.
The Council for Inclusive Capitalism. And it's supposed to be like, we're going to transform the entire world's economic system into something that's more geared around caring and sharing. That was Klaus Schwab's words, which sounds an awful lot like communism.
Right.
So you're kind of getting the communism in through the corporate. So you got communism and fascism fused in the China model. And now you're going to use the kind of fascist lockstep, really like corporate thing guided by these huge passive investment companies like BlackRock. And you're going to get everybody acting in the same way. And then they're going to coordinate, because you can make more money if you coordinate with the heads of state. Like, let's say that I want to introduce such and such product, and I can convince the heads of state that this is a really great idea, and they can, loosen regulation that would allow me to have that edge on the market ahead of time. Like maybe they made that deal after they went skiing and had some hookers in Davos.
Or Park City.
Yeah. Just this is what I think is going on. So the model that we're being forced into that's been screwing up everything. That's why we had DEI in all of our corporations. It didn't just leak out of the universities. It's because they have to score on their corporate equality index score and all these stupid metrics. The reason that's happening is to build the China model in inverse here. Now, think long term though. Who's going to win this game? The country that's ruthlessly been using it for 40 years already and knows all the ins and outs of it, or the countries that are like stumbling backwards into it and not really wanting to do it?
And did you worry about this happening when you saw all these like tech guys?
You mean like the ones that are literally on like the board of Bilderberg? Yes, I did. I'm like, oh no. Oh, the scariest sentence I have.
Or do you think that they're like kind of working against it? They
might be. I don't know. Like, did Elon Musk wake up? That's a legit question, right? He said unequivocally a few years ago that he's a socialist. And now he seems to be very pro-Trump and very pro-capitalism and very pro-free speech. Did he wake up, or is it an act? I know people who know Elon. I don't know Elon. I've heard that it's genuine.
Yeah, I think it is.
But it's also like he hasn't, Michael Malice and I have a friendly debate on how many red pills somebody's supposed to take. Michael says you're supposed to just take one, but I don't think that's not the whole bottle. But there's a lot of, like, what if the bottle has 100 pills in it, right? There's maybe 5, right? It's the right number. I don't think Elon's taken all of the red pills he needs to take yet. Like, I still think, like, he's still like, oh yeah, brain chips. It's like, no, not brain chips. Like, wait,
Yeah.
let's at least slow down on that one. And he's like, oh yeah, we're going to build this whole, I'm going to make X into the everything app that is mirrored off of the Chinese WeChat. Like, ooh, wait, slow down, right? And now he's in deals with Visa to make financial processing happening. I'm like, like, slow down here. Like, where is he? I don't know. But then we start looking at Bezos. We start looking at Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg is playing the video game of life. Nothing's real. Nothing matters. There's no real morals as far as I can tell. But Zuckerberg needs to get the most points. Mm-hmm. And so, like, Trump's in power now. So he's like, oh, yeah, Biden's guys are really mean to me. And it's like, I don't know where these guys are. Yeah. I don't know where. And when you get that level of FU money, like, you get weird.
You
get weird.
And you don't have people around you really telling you no, ever.
Ever.
You just have people going, yes. And that starts when you're in the 100 millionaire space. That doesn't start when you're a billionaire.
Yeah.
It's like that's what I said, joke about this all the time. I'm like, a lot of you have never been with dick ridden an actual billionaire, and it shows. Like, they're very mercurial too, because it is very much like whatever their obsession is, whatever their whimsy is, whatever, and then it can change on a dime.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't trust any of it, although what do you believe, as someone who's studied all of this and seen this, what do you believe is the best way forward?
It's very clear that they actually respond to stuff that we say and do. If we make enough noise and make something clear enough and the people get mad, whether it's, did we end up with vaccine passports? No, we did not end up with vaccine. Not. If we get it, and I don't even think it's that many people in the population. I've heard that it might be as small as 12 or 13% of the population refuses to go along and makes enough noise about it. You can actually change their course. I do agree that Elon Musk has strongly different views than he had 5 years ago, maybe even 1 year ago, when he realized, like, if the Democrats win, they're going to put him in prison. They're going to destroy everything, right?
But it feels like Elon has strong views about the West in general. Western, the Enlightenment values, first principles.
Yes.
Has he opened his eyes to the bigger game of, like, this either goes away because it was a miracle,
right,
as guys like Jonah Goldberg have laid out in the history of humanity, or do we somehow salvage it?
No, I think that's right. And I think so what do we do is, like, obviously Elon Musk is probably one of the most accessible of these people. I mean, I can't guarantee that I can get Elon's attention on X, but I know that I have a way better shot of getting Elon's attention on an issue than I do of getting Jeff Bezos' attention on it, or Mark Zuckerberg's attention, right? That's not using, like, oh, I know a guy. I can go tag him on X, and everyday normal people, sometimes he's like, good idea. Yeah. Right. And so he is still in this process of learning more. And it's very clear that he's learning more. True. Right.
And I think Trump is this way too.
Trump is too. Trump's very responsive.
And they're very accessible. They'll let reporters in. They'll field questions on the fly. They don't have binders. It's like.
Yeah. I mean, I met Trump now. So, like, yeah, it's totally accessible. Yeah. I mean, he's president. He's not like.
And I will say, even though Elon doesn't hear no, he does allow an entire platform to shit talk about him
all the time,
all day long. Long. I don't think he doesn't see that. He's clearly aware of things that are being said, whether that permeates.
True or false, like, if somebody's shit talking me, I have very limited resources. Elon can personally shut down their social media accounts and build a cruise missile.
True.
There aren't a lot of people that can build their own cruise missile, to take out some guy talking trash on the internet. But.
So if you had advice for normies, just the average person who's not all up here in their heads or all on X fighting the battles of Western civilization or whatever, how does somebody stay sane in this kind of media ecosystem moving forward? How do they check themselves? What is the best way forward if you were advising, an average human on how to stay in optimism and not get, like, self-radicalize?
Well, you have kind of two real questions there. How do you stay sane and ground yourself in this environment and do the best that you can? We already said the magic word, which is pause. It's like, there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of the ways that things are manipulated. This is a term that comes from George Soros, but everybody uses it. The CCP adopted it in the 90s explicitly. I mean, George took it over there. Soros, like, I don't know him, but Soros took it over there and taught them what's called reflexivity, reflexive movements. What's a reflexive movement look like? It's all of a sudden came out of nowhere and everybody has to talk about it right now. And we have to do something.
It's the current thingism.
It's the current thing. It's right. Current thing is the slang term for a reflexive push.
Interesting.
All you have to do is slow your roll and don't add fuel to the reflexive push.
In 12 step, like you learn this very early in sobriety, and I've talked about how it saved me. There's one line in the big book and it says pause when agitated or doubtful. Yeah. And it's like agitated can also be excited.
That's
you
right.
can also
That's
be feeling that kind of like bipolar mania or whatever.
That's right.
It doesn't have to just be mad. It can also be yay.
The goal is to create the social mania. What George Soros said actually is that the changes in history happen when there's a large gap between what is true and what people believe is true, right? And so the goal of a reflexive push is to get people to believe something. What's the classic example is the bank run. If we don't go get all our money out of the bank right now, it's going to be gone and we're never going to have our money. So what do? We go get our money out of the bank because we're no fools. And then the bank collapses, but it wouldn't have. Right. So you create the outcome.
The toilet paper rush.
By creating the gap between reality and belief.
Right.
And exploit that. And that's literally, George Soros wrote a whole book called Alchemy of Finance explaining how he does this to like crash currencies and things and to short markets. He says he takes a malicious pleasure in shorting institutional favorites.
Wow.
Like the United States is an institutional favorite on the world stage, right? Right. So how do you avoid that? Well, when you see something where there's this kind of madness of crowds rushing in a particular direction, it's pause. Take a moment. You don't have to get involved. And I think that actually links to, how do we stay sane? How do we, all the other questions is I think that there's got to be, we've turned politics into this weird hybrid of like sport and religion.
And entertainment.
Yeah, you're right. And so we've got like, do something more meaningful in a local sense. And I don't mean necessarily go volunteer for your, school board, which you can get involved in local politics. That's great. But I mean like cook dinner for your family.
Yeah, totally.
Like step back, do something, like the kids call it touching grass, right? Do something real with actual human beings around you. Or it doesn't have, if you like to be a loner, like go sit and like meditate or whatever it is you like to do, or knit or whatever your thing is that like just takes you back to where your zone is. I think it's really valuable to try to do stuff with other human beings, especially if there's like service involved. Cooking a meal for a family is an act of service. It grounds you back. It reminds you of what actually matters. A lot of this crap isn't just, remote, but it also is all reflexive. A lot of it's just, it's influencers making content to make clicks, to make payout schemes, deliver money to them to get their accounts to grow so that they can get a $150,000 contract to talk about some wind boondoggle nobody wants. Right. That's a real story, but I won't name the name.
Yeah. What's your biggest defect of character?
That I can't leave it alone. It's very clear that I, in many cases, can't leave things alone. But it's weird, right? Because how often is the story that your greatest defect of character is also one of your greatest strengths?
It's always the same thing.
Damn it. That's like how I accomplish almost everything. And yet it's totally toxic in a lot of ways.
You're a dog with a bone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be your biggest asset too.
It turns out.
Yeah.
Oh, your second biggest asset.
Well, I knew we'd get there eventually. What is anything else you want to say before we close out?
I don't hate Christians. I'm so frustrated with this. I'm not supposed to signal that they're getting into my head, but it's not that they're getting into my head.
They're getting into your heart.
No, it's that they're getting into other people's heads.
Oh.
Like this is serious.
Yeah.
There are people that I know who are getting canceled from talks. They're like, we can't have you because you're friends with James and James hates Christians. It's like secondhand cancellation over being friends with me over this lie. This is absolutely preposterous that this is having,
that's also
weird cancel
very
culture.
left-like.
Very left-like, very left-like. And some of those are not like small cancellations. Some of them are like, oh yeah, you're going to speak at this conference or whatever. Some of them are extraordinarily significant, like as big as it gets.
Because how would you define woke?
I define it as according to what the word says, that you woke up to a belief in the structural systems of power that are contouring all of our lives.
Right.
And the need to resist those for your particular group.
Got it. All right. Where can we find you?
At Conceptual James everywhere but Facebook, and at New Discourses, I think everywhere.
And that's your Patreon.
Yeah, I think it's New Discourses.
Okay.
Patreon/New Discourses. Yeah, Facebook, I made a killer meme joke and they banned me for life.
Oh.
Do you know who Yakov Smirnoff was? Classic, Russian comedian.
Mm-hmm.
He used to do these things where he'd flip it around and say it backwards, in capitalist America, you make show, and Soviet Russia, show makes you, or something. That was his whole shtick. So I made a meme of him that said, back when it was like the big news, what they were doing in Canada with the medical assistance in dying, the MAID program, the Dr. Kevorkian program. I said, I made a meme of him, and it says, in socialist Canada, suicide hotline calls you. Lifetime ban from Facebook for that. Which I think the lifetime ban from Facebook, they said that I was encouraging self-harm and banned my account for forever.
Come on, Zuck.
Yeah, he hasn't given it back yet. So his free speech is fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
We are the fake news now.
We are the fake news now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's going to get fucking weird. That's what Kat D and I were talking about.
Oh,
She's like, it's going to get weird.
This whole year is going to be so insane because the left's going to throw everything it can. And I mean the global left, right? So I mean like Germany doing weird crap.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like there's going to be like attempts at wars, weird political things. There's going to be all kinds of crap to just derail Trump. And then it's psyops after psyops after psyops after psyops. If normies know nothing else, if you see it on social media, probably your first gut instinct should be
it's a psyop.
It's a psyop. Maybe somebody's trying to manipulate me if that's like something shocking, right?
Yeah.
If it's just like normal stuff, but but not even like the health world, like the Maha, eat better world is like there's some crazy stuff. And it's like, how to get your diet better, blah, blah, blah. Eat this, eat that, have some eggs. Next thing you know, it's like, here's a picture of Hitler. And it's like, what? I'm sorry. That's Reich nationalist. That's like a whole thing. That's a guy. That's like his whole shtick.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh. Oh. Very popular.
Oh, I've met him.
Oh, P.S. If they're anonymous, you don't know them. That's another thing.
I'm like, oh, I've met him.
And PPS, you're not anonymous on the internet. You should know that.
He told me that I'm a thorn in his side.
I think that's good. Like props.
Because I asked them why their magazine was so gay.
Answer is self-evident. Fascism's like the gayest thing ever. It's repressed gay turned into like a political philosophy.
Oh, we should end on that note.
The check-in with Bridget and Cousin Maggie can now be found at PHETASY.com. It's been titled Another Round with Bridget Phetasy, and it's now in video.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.